What's the worst coworker you've ever worked with? Hired a cook on a good recommendation. He was just fine the first 2 weeks. Then I noticed food going missing. Then supplies started going missing. Then a customer told me that he had been adding auto 30% tips as food purchases. When I looked at the books, I saw that he had been adding 30% tips to all the credit card sales. And the cash rings were off from what should have been sold. I fired him that day. The next day he came in and apologized. Said he was on drugs and was going to rehab. I wished him well. Then next day he tried to break in after close and was caught. Idiot. Me reading your comment, I hired a cook. Oh, this is going to be about drugs. As a former cook and dishwasher. It could have also been about assault with a deadly weapon while on the clock, constant sexual assault harassment, stalking the underage hostess, cussing out customers constantly, dropping ice in the deep fryer, constantly throwing knives and screaming hot pans at the dishwasher, bringing illegal firearms to work, stealing from coworkers, etc. Goddamn FNG. Please tell me you haven't actually seen all of those. I've seen all that and more. When I was a dishwasher in Southern California, I used to have drunk, coked out cooks chuck 500 frying pans at my head and throw knives at me to wash. I also worked for a 60-year-old sous chef who would constantly talk about ducking the 16-year-old hostess. But it's okay because the legal age is 16 in NZ. He would say, I lived in NZ back then. That all stopped when our tweaker, Bogan cook threatened to slit the sous chef's throat, because that girl was his best mate's little sister. I knew a 30-year-old manager who was ducking a 17-year-old hostess. The girl was using the attention to gain more profitable shifts and job perks like leaving early. This pissed off all the other servers and hostesses, so they ratted them out and got both fired. Restaurant drama is unreal. Customers have no idea all the shit that's going on right under their noses. I'm a teacher now. Last year I was a part-time teacher and worked as a waiter, dishwasher, busboy in the evenings. Most of my 7th graders were more mature than my coworkers. He just wouldn't work. Just wouldn't. This was in a research lab. He was a visiting researcher from another country, and he spent a lot of time asking tons of non-work related questions, to the point of disrupting others' work. In the course of a year, he designed one very basic experiment, and didn't actually do it. Just designed it. He was above doing bench work apparently. He picked fights with everyone doing any experiment related to the one he was planning, because he didn't want to have to share credit for anyone. He wouldn't clean up after himself, wouldn't pick up things from the floor. He actually called me in from another room because he wouldn't take a stringless tea bag out of his mug. Also on a different occasion, because he'd knocked some things off a hanger on the back of the door and for whatever reason wouldn't pick them up. It was kind of like working with a child. He must have had servants where he lived. I don't know how, but he was there for his PhD. Boss fired him. He was one of 2 people in her 30-plus year career that she'd ever fired. Edit, 90 messages, whoa. In the interest of not inspiring reinforcing any stereotypes, I won't name the country. Such a person could come from many, and I dare say any, country honestly. He wouldn't do bench work. During his PhD? Very strange given the work is what leads to the discovery. Sometimes you have an army of undergrads doing the bench work, but usually you have to train them yourself, which requires you to at least know how to do the bench work. Explaining the underlying principles of an assay always tested how well I understood it myself. I worked with a guy who'd interrupt any conversation to talk about anything as if he was the expert. And I don't use anything as a hyperbole. He truly had something to say about anything, including things he had never heard of or obviously didn't know much about. When the subject being discussed was something in the category of things he didn't know much about, he would slowly steer the conversation away from the original discussion to something he would like to talk about at the moment. It was both amazing and the most annoying thing I had ever had to deal with. He was like that Wikipedia game where you start with Star Wars and somehow end up on LGBTQ+ struggles. Not to mention the conversation was basically 98% of him just talking nonstop. Everybody else was way too polite and against conflict to say anything, including me, so most people just tried to stay away from him, but he'd follow people around. I eventually left, but I even remember having a nightmare where he was the best man at my wedding. I worked with a guy like that. My favorite was he would jump in speaking of X, that reminds me of insert totally unrelated item and super long story, and it got to the point the rest of the team just stopped talking. I thought I was desultory until I met this guy. My ex-girlfriend's sister and father had Asperger and did that, I don't especially relate it to that, but now I recall it. When they were both together, they were constantly jumping in on each with different stories, and other people had no chance to talk. It was so exhausting. I have a friend like this. We've always assumed it's the ASD, but I suppose it's obviously hard to know for sure since you can't do the A-B comparison. He gets interested in, obsessed with, very particular, invariably aggressively boring topics, memorizes a truly mind-blowing list of facts, and then just blasts them at you in a constant stream almost from the moment you meet him until you finally manage to extricate yourself from the interaction, possibly hours later. This guy named Daniel I used to work with at McDonald's in high school. He let everyone know he worked out and enjoyed being on the football team. He had this thing about taking 5 shits a day. He would walk by on his way back from the toilet, chest out, shoulders back, and triumphantly announce that shit number 3. Ducking Daniel. I had a manager once who dumped trash on my desk my 3rd day there. She said it was to remind me that taking out the trash was part of my job description. It wasn't. I was a research assistant at a mortgage firm. Whoa. Had this same situation. We had a full maintenance crew, but my department had previously helped with parking lot trash until our hours were cut, which was discussed and mandated from corporate. The top guy for our location came in extra early, picked up the parking lot trash, and dumped it on my desk. Then he berated all of the managers in front of everyone from my department. Just the tip of the iceberg when it came that asshole though. How does higher management not do anything? Are they all just as shitty as him? Higher management probably doesn't really know who does what at the company as long as it gets done. After all, it's middle management's job to deal with the peasants' workers. This is about 15 years ago, but the office I worked in instituted a scent-free policy. One woman, who was already insufferable, was so offended by it that she snuck in her perfume collection. She'd walk down the halls and spray perfume into empty offices or cubicles when no one was looking or before everyone arrived in the morning. This went on for well over a month or two, and we had no idea who was responsible. My coworkers and I started referring to this mysterious person as the Chanel Bandit. She was finally caught on camera in the act. She'd left for 3 weeks vacation and was unaware that we had installed cameras after a break-in. Some of us already suspected her, as the Chanel Bandit mysteriously stopped spraying while she was away. She quit right after she was caught. None of us were sad to see that cedar-scented psycho leave. I didn't realize a scent-free policy was a thing. Was that due to the type of work you were doing or allergies or something else entirely? I've worked in a cologne perfume-free restaurant before. A lot of seafood, specifically raw oysters and clams, will pick up subtle hints of a scent and change the flavor a person is paying $40 DZ for. Now, we did have a guy who preferred Axe body spray to anything else, so this might have been a factor, but still is true with the subtler, less offensive scents you can put on yourself. Edit. Also why a lot of establishments went to a non-smoker break policy and switched to making a free, family meal break for employees. My worst coworker was one I worked with when I was a cashier at Walmart. She approached me and asked me to cash out her paycheck. I was still new at the job and never got training on how to do that function. She was sympathetic, so she walked me through how to do it. Transaction over and done, I go on about my day. I get called back a couple of days later by my managers and they circled me in an office and accused me of stealing. After tears, videotapes, and telling them what happened, they told me that apparently this coworker of mine had stolen not only from me, but several other people that day as well. They just wanted to confirm I wasn't in on the deal. Duck Walmart, and fuck that bitch for almost getting me arrested. I was a Walmart cashier, and some young adults, I checked them out. They came back, and said I shorted them $20. I said $5, don't think I did. My drawers were always balanced, to the penny. They insisted I shortchanged them $20. Giving them the benefit of the doubt, because, shit, I've been shortchanged before, and maybe I really did. I'm not impervious to mistakes. So I called my CSM over, described the situation and said I'd like to drop my drawer, have her count it. Now the young adults are all, it's no big deal, we don't want to be any trouble or waste any time. And of course you know the ending, those two guys were working a con on me, or trying to. CSM counted my drawer, and it balanced to the penny. The conmen left, and my CSM said I did the right thing. I was right, I didn't shortchange those bastards. Your story about the girl conning you with cashing the check reminded me of those dudes trying to con me. Sorry she got the best of you. Man, it sucks that they tried to scam you, but it makes me happy that you were completely willing to have your manager count the drawer. I was once shortchanged at a cheap-ass buffet when I was in high school, and wasn't even upset about it. It was a $5 buffet. I paid with a $20. Cashier handed me $5 change. I paused for a second, because I thought maybe I had been mistaken, but then felt sure I hadn't even had a $10. Again, not even upset, brain farts happen, and I said, "Oh, didn't I give you a 20? No. You gave me a 10, the cashier spat immediately. I was a bit taken aback by the shit attitude of the cashier and just said okay and walked away. Manager came to our table while we were eating and apologized, handing me a 10. Bitch. My girlfriend had the opposite happen to her one time at GameStop. She bought a $10 Nintendo card, and paid with a $20, and asked for a few singles with the change. The cashier said, "You mean like a 10, a 5, and 5 ones?" She said yes. So the cashier sold her the Nintendo card, and gave her $20 in change, a $10 bill, a $5 bill, and 5 $1 bills. We didn't realize what the cashier did until it was far too late to rectify. I paid for some smokes with 100 and some snacks, so back then the total was less than $15. The very young cashier counted my change out to $80, then hesitated, then counted out 2 more 20s and the $6 or $7 of small bills on top of that. I had to walk a very confused young man through the math and make him take the $40 back. I still don't think he fully understood what I was saying. A free $40 would have been nice, but it was obviously the kid's first job and I don't roll that way anyway, didn't want the poor guy getting screamed at when his till came up short.